Well, welcome, my friends, to this, my inaugural address from the Bachelor Pad, Fortress of Solitude, where all step stools can double as end tables for your favorite whiskey. Las Vegas finest right here. Smoke Wagon Small Batch. And I thought that I would just talk a little bit about some of the ideas I've been having recently related to Magic the Gathering. I have been a player off and on. Most recently, I was more of a seller online after a friend of mine got me re-engaged with the game in October of last year. And shortly thereafter, I started selling online. If you've bought cards from Volition Games on either TCG Player or on eBay, that's me. I stopped doing that and had to take a pause, which I'll go into in a different video about why that was. But as someone who has had a relationship with the game over the years, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I sort of perceive the current kerfluffle around mostly what I consider to be modern Magic. Back in the day, I started playing it was definitely the Unlimited era, but I may even have had some of the Alpha and Beta cards back in the day, because it was early. It was back in college when a friend of mine introduced me to the game. And I had a couple of long boxes, about this long. And my ex-wife and we would play pretty regularly up until the early 2000s, I guess. And I would buy cards here and there, and, I didn't keep them all. But I remember when I moved cross-country in the latter half of the first, it was 2008. I remember when I moved cross-country, I was like, I got these Magic cards. I don't know what the hell to do with them, so I just threw them out. And then fast forward all these years later, 14 years later, when I start kind of getting re-engaged with it, and I see all this classic art, and I'm just like, I remember I had this, and I had that, and man, I think I had 3 of those, and, all this. And I still thought that the art was just amazing, and the memories of playing the game back then were just so fun. So I got back into it, and I started selling the cards, and then I stopped doing that. But as I was a seller, I was also a collector, and I wasn't buying massive collections or anything like that, but I was buying, to complete full sets from the era that I was familiar with. And I think right now, at the point that we're at, being a collector is the way to go. And you can obviously collect whatever you want. But I think that collecting vintage is probably your best bet if you want to maintain some sort of value over the cards. And a lot of people may say, well, they're just getting reprinted into oblivion. The reserve list doesn't matter anymore. And that's true. I can't deny that. But the art on the original cards, to me, is so special that none of the reprints are even close. They're not as attractive to me. I don't like the modern style of the cards as much. I'm not really a fan of all the variants and the glitter and stuff like that. So, there's a more sort of classic, almost like pulp fantasy type of feel to some of the earlier cards that I really, really like. And obviously those are the cards that I remember playing with. Now I suppose younger people may have fonder memories of a different era, but I'm sure that some of them look at the history of the game and think to themselves, well, yes, I've got this card in, a reprint from whatever set that came out in, 2012, but I want the original of that. What does it take to get the original printing of a card like that? And I know that even vintage Magic has been taking a real shot in, recent weeks, recent months, since the bubble popped. But to me, that doesn't matter, because I always think that the original cards are going to be worth something, as opposed to some of the reprint cards, which could literally just slide into oblivion. I think it's going to be a curve like this, where the original vintage cards maintain some value and then everything afterwards comes after. and just kind of floats off closer and closer to zero. So I think at least from my perspective, being able to acquire cards that will still maintain some sort of value, acquiring the cards that I'm familiar with from when I was the most avid player, and just because they have that older aesthetic that I really like, that to me is reason enough to be a collector, even given the state of everything that's going on. I don't think that reprinted cards with 6 variants and, being reprinted in back-to-back sets, that's not good for the game. It's not good for the ecosystem. And I also would argue that the cards have an inherent value in the sense that it is a collectible trading card game. Whether or not you think everything should be available to you for 5 cents, regardless of its classified rarity on the card from common to mythic, it doesn't make any sense, because things are going to be rarer by virtue of the level that's assigned to them. A mythic is obviously going to be printed in less numbers than a common. So if you just go out there and proxy all the mythics so that you can get a full play set in every deck that you run, that might be great for your game, but that's not supposed to drive the ecosystem. And the company shouldn't cater to people that want to flatten the ecosystem and destroy the power balance of the game in that way. It's simple supply and demand. The rarer cards are potentially going to be worth money, especially when they're coupled with the fact that they're cards people want to play with. Granted, there's bulk rares and bulk mythics out there. There's no doubt about that. And those aren't the ones that people are proxying, are they? But it's built into the collectible nature of the game that some cards are going to be worth more than others. And Hasbro is catering to these folks that just want to talk about game pieces that should be freely available to everybody, and they're destroying the secondary market. And Rudy's talked on his channel about what that's doing to LGSs, who are not only getting screwed on the new sets that they order, but also on the singles that they're selling. Because now people don't want to pay the premium prices for the singles, the older singles, that frequently is driving the profit margin for the store. And so now you don't have a place to go and play with your friends on Friday night, Sure, you can go to other people's houses and stuff, but, there's something about the scene at your local LGS. And I suppose if you're not into that, that argument doesn't hold water. But I think a lot of people are. And Hasbro is doing their level best to destroy that part of the economy, which in the long run is going to undermine the game. And I think as prices come down, for somebody like me, I'm here to buy the early singles, as often as I can. Right now, my goals are about completing full sets, which you may see I've got binders down here for certain sets. And I have complete Ice Age, complete the Dark, Fallen Empires. I've just started working on Arabian Nights. I've got a good amount of Unlimited and a good amount of Legends. And then these are all the binders of the newer sets that I still have cards in from when I was selling. I still got a bunch of cards in here. These are the rares and the mythics. I just haven't listed them because I've gotten out of that sort of cycle. But maybe I will one of these days. So what I'm planning to do, I guess, with this channel, there's 2 things. I'm learning how this whole YouTube ecosystem works, the podcasting thing with the equipment and blah, 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 editing this video, the small amount I'm going to do after this, post-production, because I have another topic, something that's a little bit more serious that I want to discuss. And this is something that sort of occupies the hobby part of my mind. I want to give a shout out, like I already said, to Rudy at Alpha Investments, Saint at Fabled Hunters, and Mike at Alpha Hoarder. I watch those guys' channels all the time. I also like watching Rob at RNG Games because he's got sort of the whole modern card shop thing going, a little bit outside of Magic with Pokemon and Lorcana and, these other kinds of events that he's running. So all that stuff is really interesting. And I figure that it's something that I watch, something that I can talk about at least semi-coherently from my perspective although I'm not into it as those guys. And so the other thing that I plan to do is use this channel for unboxings, let's say. You know, when I get orders that come in and I need to put them into my binders in order to fill in the spots for the empty slots that are still in those sets, you know, I plan to document that. I really like the format that Mike at Alpha Hoarders got when he does his alpha purchases. So if you watched this far, I thank you very much. This is like I said, the first discussion that I'm posting, that I'm recording. Hopefully somebody out there will be listening to it, but if not, it's practice for me, and I wish you a good night.